Hi, Laura.
Hi, Kristen.
It's so good to see you.
Likewise.
We were just
Happy.
saying, sorry, go
No,
ahead.
go ahead. No, I was just saying happy days. I love seeing you.
I love seeing you too. We were just catching up for a moment and realized it had been a minute since we actually got to like chat about our lives.
hmm
We do some work together, and so we get to talk about that stuff, but not so much on the catching up on the personal side. Well, thank you so much for sitting down for a chat. When I first started this little series, I mentioned that I'll get to, have conversations with all kinds of incredible women that I respect and admire. And that's everyone from folks that are, launching their own companies or have, are running companies to the corporate baddies of the world. And you're one of my corporate baddies of the world.
I received that.
Good, 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 good. Yes, because as we are, I know we've talked about this, but part of the reason why I titled the series kind of a big deal is we do tend to brush off our compliments
hmm
and our impact. So receive it and own it.
hmm
That's the best thing we can do for ourselves, I think. So I usually start by doing a quick little introduction before you introduce yourself, just on how we know each other. So, Laura and I have been part of an awesome organization on the board of the Youth Leadership Institute, which I would love for folks to check out if they have not yet, especially if you're based here in California. But we've been on the board together for like 4 or 5 years at this point,
Yeah.
like, which is
Yeah, I
crazy.
think it's been four and a half
Four,
years. Yeah.
yes, because I started in 2020, right in the middle of the beginning of the pandemic.
hmm
Um, and we've been co-chairs for the last year and a half ish or so. And so I've had the like absolute honor of getting to partner with her. She's one of those like crazy smart, crazy kind, like, but brings this like beautiful calming energy into every room that she's in. Like it makes me take my like wildest, like my like
My
frenetic energy down and
family
not.
would totally disagree with you. I am a chaos goblin, but I take it. I take it.
No, 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 no. There is no way that I've known you for this long and that could be true. I refuse to believe it. At least in a professional setting,
Yeah.
the what I get to experience is, it's interesting on a board for those that have had this experience. You're dealing with all kinds of incredible talent and intellect and personalities and opinions, and all of it is so beautiful and wonderful, especially when you're in a space where the work is in the impact space and as it relates to youth. So there's a lot of conversations that we're having. And Laura just always has a way of like bringing everybody back onto the same kind of level playing field. And that's something I have always appreciated and admired about you. Her LinkedIn title, which I just recently looked up for the first time in a hot minute, this is who she is in general: HR disruptor, super mom, employee wellness advocate, design thinker, and culture architect. And I think that might be one of my favorite LinkedIn titles that I've ever
Oh,
seen.
thank you. I took a went to a seminar. This was like years ago when LinkedIn was still like in early stages, and everyone puts their title, their actual title, and it'll say like, I don't know, clerical associate 3. Nobody knows what that is.
Yeah.
And so they told us you should talk about like what are the things that bring you the most joy or define who you are. And so that's where we landed.
I love that. I love that because, so much of the conversation recently is around personal branding and
Mhm.
how you want to be known in the world. And we are so much more than our title, and we bring so much more to the table than just that. And so I think being able to showcase all these different facets of who we are,
Mhm.
in this, but yours is done in a way that's actually like understandable. So like sometimes we
Thank
get a
you.
little crazy. Currently chief people officer at one workplace.
Mhm.
And I'd love to just actually start there. Like you've landed in this, C-suite role in corporate world. Have you always been in like the HR people centered spaces, or has your journey led you to this moment? Kind of maybe just brief overview of where you're at today.
Sure. So, like most HR people from days gone by, I thought I was going to do a stop in HR because I didn't know what it was. I had tried a couple of things. I did marketing, I did IT, I was a caterer. I was a bartender. I did event planning. I did a whole bunch of things. Didn't quite know what I wanted to be because I wanted to be an orthodontist. And my
What?
junior, yeah,
I
yeah,
didn't
I
know
love
that.
teeth. I love teeth. Um, don't love breath, but I love teeth.
Yeah.
But I have always been a creative type. I took interior design classes after I graduated college while I was trying to figure some stuff out. And I realized that could actually be a career, but nothing really stuck in a way that I was like, this is the thing. And I felt like I had to figure it out. So I did some temping and I landed at a company in their IT department. And I've always been a very curious person, asking tons of questions. Somebody tapped me on the shoulder and said, I think you might really want to work in HR. And I'm like, what do they do?
Yeah.
And so I got to have lunch with different people from the HR team. I got to meet folks and I was like, oh, that's kind of neat. You like hire people and you give them things that they need to do their job. And maybe you might fire some people along the way. And so that started my HR career. I moved from IT to HR, and what I thought was going to be a short stint has lasted over 25 years.
Wow.
And I've sat in almost every seat within HR, which looking back, I'm like, where did I find the time? Because I still feel very much like the young version of me. I don't know if kids do that to you or not. Like they just make you feel young all the time, or well, until
Or
you start to
old.
use slang. Yeah, you try to use their slang, and then they're like, okay, old lady. But like I just feel like I'm always learning. I'm always trying to figure it out. And one day, I didn't know what I wanted to be. But one day, one of my leaders bought us all a book called, I think it was called Designing Your Life.
Mhm.
And so I went home over the holiday break and read it and started to do some soul searching and like asking myself some really tough questions about where I saw myself in the future. And when I came back, I met with the head of my department and I said, I think I want to be the head of HR for like a small or like medium sized company. And he didn't bat an eyelash. And that was the first time I had a really big, audacious goal that no
Mm.
one laughed at. And I was like, oh, wait, maybe I'm onto something. And he gave me lots of guidance and support and mentorship and kind of helped me just make decisions that would align me on this path. And
Mm.
fast forward, that was 10 years ago. Here I
Wow.
am.
Wow. That's
So,
amazing. That's incredible. I'm so curious after being in the space for as many years as you have. I'm sure you've seen the space change and shift and morph over the years. In some ways good, in some ways, I don't know.
yeah.
So curious kind of what trends you've seen over the years.
Yeah. When I started, I mean, clearly over 25 years ago, things were on paper.
Mhm.
We were very transactional as a function. And over the years, I've watched in different industries and different types of companies where they've become more strategic, more technology forward, more analytical, more data centered. And so it's kind of like as I look back and I think about colleagues that kind of got left behind, it's because they didn't keep up with the next trends. Like if you don't know how to use AI in HR, which
Mm.
feels counterintuitive because we are very human centered, but you can really use this in a powerful way to help kind of lessen some of the administrative burden on yourself so that you can get to know people, center them in the work that you're doing, spend time listening and learning and understanding. And that for me as an HR practitioner has never changed. I've always, and maybe it's the companies I came up through, and maybe it's the people that I was surrounded with, always inclusive, always listening, always thinking about what's a new way or a different way to do this. What's going to make less hassle for the employee? What's their experience going to be like? And I've been really fortunate to be able to weave that through my career.
Mm.
But I think had I not embraced technology, kept my personal core values front and center, and only taken opportunities that aligned, I
Mm.
don't think I would be saying the same thing right now.
That's super interesting. I feel like I was going to ask a question around, if there's someone that's maybe a little bit earlier on in their career and is considering what it might mean to kind of go down this path and are interested in people, HR spaces, what advice you might give in how they should be entering those experiences or opportunities. And I heard you say embracing technology, which I think in many ways we would all probably do
Mm-hmm.
do
Yeah.
well in this moment to be considering, but with the lens of your core values being front and center. Because I think sometimes we can say embrace technology, but these two things actually go hand in hand, which is how are you using these things
Yeah.
in ways that are making people's lives better, not just driving more efficiency to the point where people then are taking on more and more work, right? Just for the sake of efficiency. So I think those two things together, that's an interesting parallel.
Yeah. I would also add staying curious. I know that there's what is the saying? There's no such thing as a dumb question. Working in HR, I firmly believe there are dumb questions. So I'll start there. However, I think when you're trying to learn and grow yourself, especially early in my career, one of the things that really propelled me forward was I stopped and I'm an introvert. I am like probably if there were a spectrum of introvertism and it was like getting close to extrovert, I am the far other end.
Really?
I like being around people makes me nervous. And the thought of speaking in front of people makes me paralyzed with fear. But something about that one-on-one interaction, small groups where I ask lots of questions, I was always like, well, how do you do that? Can I shadow you? Can I have lunch with you and ask you a couple of questions? Those interactions earlier in my career really helped me to figure out, well, what's the next move that makes sense where I can grow and learn more. And it also helped me to move into spaces that I was very uncomfortable with. Most HR people don't like numbers, which is why we end up in HR. But I can do analytic work. I can, create tables and use data to inform decisions. And those skills have been instrumental in me as I've grown through my career. But had I shied away for it because it was something that was uncomfortable for me, I don't know if I would be maybe I would be in the same position. I don't know if I would be as effective without those skills, but I would also add in like that curiosity and leaning into the uncomfortable. The worst that happens is you're like, oh, this isn't for me. And you move on, which I know is I'm speaking from a place of privilege to be able to say, well, if it doesn't work, you move on. But as you gain experience, you can start writing your own ticket. You can start calling your own shots. And that's part of the beauty of being in a role as you kind of grow through the ranks, not just in HR, but just in your career. When you have what do they say? The person with the money makes the decisions. I say that to my son all the time. When he was little, like whoever has the money.
Like, I'm the one with the purse.
Yeah. And so, it's like you hold the keys. You have the knowledge. You have the expertise. You have the skills that are needed. You get to have some say in how you use them, where you use them. And that's really powerful in and of itself, especially as a woman.
Yes.
Insane.
Yeah. Yes. The curiosity piece, I'm really curious about the moment that we're in. I just heard from a friend of mine who's very deep in the AI space, who's, working with some of these huge corporations, and the head of HR for a massive organization was like, you're no longer going to be hired for the questions you can answer, but for the questions you can ask, because it's going to be about extracting information more so than it is about, giving information, because the information is going to now be there. People will have access, but you need to have a certain level of expertise to know how to ask the right question to pull out the answer you're seeking. And I thought, how beautiful is that for those of us that just love to ask a question all the time?
Yeah.
Like, great. But my fear in that is we are not necessarily teaching our kids to be critical thinkers any longer. And it's not really taught in schools to think about we're teaching people, like, don't ask the question, be quiet, just listen, obey, what have you. But we need to be cultivating that curiosity in a way that allows for people to know that not only is it okay, it's actually now going to be expected.
Yeah. I took a workshop at one of the organizations I used to work at. And we did a whole deep dive into design thinking, but from the HR perspective, because you typically see design thinking like in the IT space, user experience, as they're building systems and how will it be received and how will it be used. And so when you flip that, you think about the person, it could be something as simple as I'm just going, like, I don't know, like late 90s, early 2000s, like everybody was wearing the bracelets, like for everything. It was like the Live Strong bracelets and all of the stuff. I always say, pretend you have a bracelet on that says, what if it were me? And so in the
Mm,
HR space, I always direct people or try to guide them down the path of, okay, you want to introduce something new. Well, what if it were me? Would I want that for myself or not? Because that
mm,
ultimately, you're an employee before you're an HR person. And
yeah.
so for me, do I want, a different type of benefit? Do I want a certain type of learning path? Do I want some type of career trajectory? Like, are those the things that would be beneficial to me as an employee? Yes. Well, then why? It becomes a no brainer. But I
Mm,
think sometimes we overcomplicate by being like textbooky and trying to, model after another company that we see as like the standard or whatever. And it's kind of like, even if you're not a naturally curious person, if you start with, what if it were me? What are the
mm,
questions that you would be asking for yourself? And,
yeah.
and use that as your starting point to move forward.
Wow. I love that. I've never heard that. And I think
Oh,
that's, it's just such a really, I mean, it's
yeah.
interesting because it is about self, but it's also then about other, right? It is, you're
Mm-hmm.
starting with what might I desire, or how would I enter into this question,
Mm-hmm.
but ultimately it's in service of others, because you're then thinking about how that will affect those around you, or that those you employ, which that's a beautiful frame. I think that
Yeah.
that's a really, to your point, if you're not naturally that way, to have a place to start from is really
Mm-hmm.
helpful for
Yeah.
people.
Yeah. I mean, how many times have you been watching something or watching someone speak and you have a question and you're like, I'm not going to ask that. I think it's too elementary, or I think it's a silly question. And somebody else stands up and asks the question very
Yes.
boldly. And you're like, oh my gosh, it's those moments. It's the same thing, only instead of asking on your own behalf, you're asking on behalf of others because someone else inevitably wants the same thing or needs the same thing that you do. So
Yeah.
if you think about what if it were me, but you frame it as, well, this could work for other people, I think it makes it easier to
Mm,
not feel like you're being selfish in the process.
mhm. That's so interesting. Yes, I've definitely early career had those
Mm-hmm.
experiences where I'm like too nervous to ask the question, or
Yeah.
it's a crowd, or that sounds ridiculous, or I should
Mm-hmm.
know that already. The amount of times we tell ourselves I should know that already, even though
Yeah.
we have nothing to do with that industry or that person's story. Like, why should I know
Mm-hmm.
that thing?
Yeah.
I have over the years become totally shameless. You've heard this, like when we're in conversations, sometimes even as board co-chairs, I'm like, I have no idea what that means. Like, can somebody please?
But I appreciate your honesty, because sometimes when you speak up and you're like, I feel like I should know this, but I have no idea what that means. I'm like, oh my gosh, I thought it was just me. And so like, even at this advanced age, I'm still afraid sometimes to say something because I'm like, I feel like I should know what that is
Yeah,
because I have experience, because I have, years under my belt, because whatever.
yeah,
And 9 times out of 10, there's someone else on the same
totally,
call that's like, I don't know
totally.
either, but they're braver than I am and they're going to say something.
Well, I wonder if it's not so much about bravery so much as it is that as we start to recognize, I think maybe this is not a gendered thing, but I am
Mm-hmm.
curious as women, right? In these conversations I've been having, so many people have said the expectation as a woman in the workplace is to be exceptional. Like, you don't get
Yeah.
to just skate by and like claim, whatever. You have to be great,
Mm-hmm.
not just okay. And so there's this pressure, almost internal pressure of like, well, I can't show my cards, because that will
Mm-hmm.
make it look like I don't know all the things that you think I already
Mm-hmm.
know, right?
Oh, yeah.
I don't want
The
to
number of
speak.
times that I've been on a call and I've been just taking notes and like highlighting, like, what does this word mean? What does this
Yeah.
acronym mean? And then afterwards, I'll casually like be talking to a colleague and be like, oh, how was your weekend? Do you know what such and such means? Like, because I don't want to call myself out in front of everyone. But at the
Yeah.
same time, and the funny thing is, usually that person will turn to me and say, I didn't know what that meant either. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, why didn't you say
Yeah.
something? And they're like, well, I didn't want anyone to know that I didn't know what it meant. And I'm like,
Right.
well, can you do that next time? Because I
Yeah.
don't want to be the person always asking.
Yes. Yes. I'm curious, as you were talking about kind of way back to like your interest in like creative spaces and design, do you see that way of thinking still playing out in your role that you have today, or the roles that
Mm-hmm.
you've taken? Like, maybe I'm leading you here a little bit, because I
Mm-hmm.
think my husband and I talk about this a lot. I was a fine art major, and the places that I've ended up are so far
Yeah.
removed, like on paper, from,
Mm-hmm.
painting in a studio or whatever. But his stance has always been like, creativity doesn't have to look a certain way. It doesn't
Yeah.
have to be that you are drawing or
Mm-hmm.
creating in a way that we think of as it relates to creativity. It
Yeah.
can come out in so many different ways. I'm wondering what that might look like for
Mm-hmm.
you.
I mean, earlier in my career, creativity looked like using different colors on the cells on an Excel sheet. I was like, look, they didn't tell us we had to use, a certain color. So I'd be like, I'm going to make this green and I'm going to make this purple. Like that was like the thing. And then I had one of my first mentors who really was the one that got me into HR, and he saw something in me that I didn't even know existed. And he had us present. We had to lead team meetings. And I was kind of
Mhm.
low person on the totem pole. Like I was the admin for the department and I had to lead team meetings just like everyone else. And once we started using PowerPoint and things like that, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to make slide decks because I need to stay on task. As you probably know in talking to me, I am all over the place sometimes, and hence the chaos goblin. And so having a conversation with me is like watching pinball sometimes. And if you're not paying attention, I've changed the topic 3 times and I'll come back to the original one.
Mhm.
So learning how to stay on task and how to like lead meetings and use different tools has helped me to, one, stay on task, but also foster my creativity. On my team today, we take turns leading our team meetings every other week. And some people reluctantly went into it, but now we've got people using Canva and PowerPoint and people that are like doing all kinds of really creative things that they don't get to do in their daily life. I mean, our payroll person is creating slides that move and have animation, and payroll is like,
Yeah.
carry the one
Yeah.
and how many PTO. Like it's very kind of, repetitive
Yeah.
in by nature. And so I feel like the things that I needed, I'm trying to create the space for other people that might need the same thing. And there's
Mhm.
a subset of people that I've worked with that do need that. And it's been amazing, one, to watch them, but also I get to be creative through that process because I'm like, I'm going to do it first so you can see, like, one, the bar is not that high, but also like creativity doesn't have to look like
A
a lot of like,
masterpiece.
yeah, like I'm not doing like a TED talk with like all of
Yeah.
the video footage and stuff behind me. I'm literally just making things move across a slide. And for some people, they're like, I didn't even know you can do that.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. The amount of times I've gotten caught up in a document because of the font is off. Like,
Yes.
I'm
Yeah.
like,
Well, I
I
mean,
cannot
changing the
read
font
this.
is like, it's a big deal.
Yes, I literally, like, if I draft something, proposal, whatever, I
Yeah.
cannot read my writing or what I've drafted until I've put it into the right. Like, it has to just look a certain way. Otherwise,
Yeah.
forget it.
Yeah, that's a really big deal. Like even, I mean, even we were talking before we started about like getting dressed, even if you're on a Zoom and like,
Yeah.
I put on a red lip for you today.
Yeah.
Like
The honor.
that's creative for me. Like,
Anytime I hear the like uniform, and this is not to knock it because I know
yeah.
this works for some people, but like the capsule thing,
Oh,
like the
yeah.
wardrobe where you have like 4 things, and like, then you don't have to, it takes one decision out of your day, is essentially
Hmm.
the theory behind it,
Yeah.
I suppose. I am like, absolutely not. If that is the one thing that I get to do during my day, it makes me feel some type of way, forget it.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, so many of the other decisions impact other people's lives.
yeah.
Like
Oh,
your
yes.
children, your dog, your significant other, your coworkers, your clients, like
This
your
is a decision for
neighbors. So
yourself.
this is like, listen, if I want to wear, overalls, or if I want to wear, hot pink, like whatever that thing is that brings me joy, or if I want to wear the all black uniform, like whatever that
Whatever.
is.
I was just in a networking, it's like an online community that someone invited me
Mhm.
to go to an event last week. And they asked one of the best, they put people into rooms to kind of get in conversation with each other, get to know each other. And the prompt first of all, Laura is the queen of the icebreaker prompt. So I'm actually bringing her game to her right now. um, the question was, what is something from your life that has shaped who you are today that might not always make it into your bio? And I was like, ooh, that is such a
good
great
one.
question. So does that bring anything for you?
Yeah, I think one, I need to think about it because I'll always have a better answer the second or third iteration. So you're going to get my rough draft right now.
That's what
so
we need. We need V1
to say by that.
Yeah, give me V1.
I think immediately a few things in my life come front and center, but I think the number one immediately, and it could be because I'm in the throes of becoming an empty nester, is watching my son grow up. Because I remember distinctly, mostly, being his age and what my experience was like. And I feel like I'm reliving life through him, but through a different lens. Like I'm still watching him and I'm not trying to live vicariously through him, but I'm getting to relive my childhood and do the things that I always wish that I could have done, but because he wants to do them. And so I think that has really created moments and opportunities for me. Like he and I do a mother-son trip every year, just the two of us. We go away. He gets to pick the location. And when he was, I think it was like, I don't know, somewhere in elementary school, he decided he wanted to go to San Diego. So it was his first trip to California. And we came, and at the end of the trip, before we went to the airport, we were standing on the beach and we were watching the sunset. And he turned to me and he's like, "Mommy, I want to live here." And I was like, "You know what? Me too." And so I mean, it took us a while, but fast forward years later, I'm like, "Hey, I have this opportunity to move to California. What do you think?" And he was like, no hesitation.
Like, let's go.
Not even batting an eyelash. Like, okay, how do we convince Dad? Because my husband is change averse. And so like we formed a partnership. So I feel like us having those moments, us being me, like growing up with him essentially, has helped me in a lot of ways guide my career, my friendships, the way I move in the world, because I want to make it a better place for him and his peers. And that's a heavy burden, but I also feel like we owe it to them in a lot of ways. Cause I mean, look around. We're not in a great place, no matter where you stand on any type of issue. Like it's just not a great place right now. And so how do I, even if it's behind closed doors, create spaces for not just my child, but other people where they feel seen, they feel heard, they feel comfortable, they feel, safe. And so I think having him has created this ripple effect that other people get to benefit from.
Oh my God. That was
a really long answer. I'm so sorry.
No, that was beautiful. I feel like I'm sitting here like thinking in my own head.
You wait till the third time I come up with an answer. It's going to be amazing.
No, that was amazing. Well,
thank
beautiful. Like what a beautiful tribute to what it means to be a working mom. I mean, I think, so many women that are navigating caretaking in whatever form that might be, whether it's for children or aging parents or whatever, all of those things do influence how we show up and how we think about our priorities and how we think about the impact we're having. Because to your point, when we're in these moments where the world feels just absolute like dumpster fire, and you don't feel like you have control over much, and you go and you try and use your voice in these spaces where you feel like you're being as loud as you can and it's still not doing anything and not moving the needle, then all we can do is focus on these small areas that we do have at least certainly not control over. I know that now as a mom of a 9 and a 6-year-old. Forget it. There's no control. I have no disillusionment there, but at least to try and make a mark or have an impact or to create, to your point, these spaces where these kids can feel safe and seen and find themselves along the way. I think that's an incredible way to think about how, like, that is not going to make it into your bio, and it should.
No, it's not.
And it should, frankly.
Thankfully, we didn't have like all of the bells and whistles they're making mistakes in front of people, like in a grand way through their social media accounts and all of that stuff. We got to make mistakes and the only person who remembers it is usually us, because the people that were there when we made the mistake are either made the same mistakes or they're like, I forgot about that. That was so long ago. And there's no proof that it happened. So,
oh gosh, I know.
Having them have a space where they can do that and understand that the more mistakes you make, the better you become in the long run, because you learn from all of that.
Yeah.
I've made so many mistakes in my career and I've never been fired for them. I've always learned from them. And I think being able to say like, oh, I probably should have done that a different way, or I should have listened to this, or I should have asked this question, creates a better opportunity for me every single time, even if the problem looks different.
Totally. Yes. Mm-hmm. I think it's coming back to your, tenets of like staying curious, your core values. Like this is also one of those things, which is you do have to find some comfort, or maybe, I'm not sure what the word is, but some ability to be at least okay in recognizing that life is one big giant experiment for the most part. Yep. And you're just trying your best every day, and we're not going to do it perfect. And so many of us, I think, especially as women, tend to be paralyzed by perfectionism and wanting to do it exactly the right way before we're out there trying the thing. But you can't learn that way.
No,
you have
I
to
I like to say I'm a recovering perfectionist.
Me too. Recovering.
Like in my early career, I thought I had to do it perfect.
I know.
But no one ever told me what perfect was. And it wasn't until I was doing HR for like a solid 6 or 7 years that someone was like, just get it done. I'm like, what? And they're like, sometimes you take too long to do things because you're trying to figure out what is the most perfect way to do it. But you're doing something for other people. It's never going to be perfect. And once you realize that and you actually sit with it, you're like, oh, you know what? It's okay for it to just be done. I could iterate it later. But the longer I take to actually launch the thing, that's where people are going to complain because it took me too long. But if I can just launch something that's good, that helps fill the need, I can make it better. I'm never going to make it perfect, but I can just make it better. Or someone else can come behind me and make it better. But the goal is never to do something perfect. And once I learned that, I was like, oh, wow, I could do so much more.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
It's
like,
yes. The unburdening of like, no, I don't need to read that email for the 45th time before I send it.
Yes.
It's okay. It's like mostly getting my point across and I'm not being offensive. Like, okay, cool.
Exactly.
It is such a difficult, there's so much research around specifically what it means, right? As women that are entering into these higher and more intense roles around feeling the need to show up in these perfect ways. But it doesn't do us any favors because our perfect is somebody else's, 150%,
There's overachievers everywhere. And so I'm like, I can't compete with other people. I was in the band. I'm not a competitive kid. I compete with myself. And I like to trash talk. I was in
a band or
band? I was in the band.
Okay.
Like I wasn't an athlete growing up. So I don't have like a competitive spirit the way a lot of people have, this natural ability to just outperform other people. I want, like being a band kid, I wanted everyone to get to the same place at the same time because that meant we all looked good. And I feel like that piece, I never understood how that was helpful until I kind of crossed the threshold of managing people. And then I was like, oh, if we all move forward together, we're all moving forward. But if like, I was in like a really competitive marching band. And so if somebody fell, we just kept marching. We were the Beyonce of marching bands. We were like, listen, sorry you fell, but we are going to just keep going. The show must go on. And so the difference is I get to, as a leader, say, hold on, the show can't go on because we can't let someone fall. We have to go back and pick up that person. And I think being able to have that control has really helped not just me, but the teams that I've been on be more successful because no one says like, oh, Laura did something wrong. They say HR did something wrong. And so in this case, I am a reflection of the person who sits next to me, whether I want to be or not. And so I don't ask everyone to be best friends, but I ask that we all move forward together, keep each other informed, ask for help, share what we know. Like all of those things are so valuable. And sometimes folks tend to gatekeep. And that's not just an HR thing. They tend to gatekeep because they think that's my security. That's the thing that's going to set me apart. When in actuality, it's the thing that makes you indispensable. Because if I know what you know and we have the open dialogue, I can now teach you something maybe you don't, or vice versa. And now you become that much more valuable.
Oh my gosh. First, I think we just heard your V2 of something from your...
maybe, yes. How much longer do we have? I might get to version 3 before we get off.
How the marching band informed the way I think about leading a team. Like that's
Who knew?
awesome.
Who knew?
Cool. Yes. Because all of our experiences do stack up to the way we show up today, right? So I love it. Well, actually, the question is, how much time do you have? Do you need to end right at our top of the hour?
I'm yours. I could be on here all day.
Oh, me too.
Like,
okay, good.
I love chatting with you.
So I do have 2 specific questions I want to make sure we get to. One is, you were mentioning what it means to be witnessing your son grow up and now, heading off to college, and this moment that you find yourself in where you were also navigating some stuff in life that forced you to take a little bit of a pause. And I'm curious about your experience there because, in fact, one of the other women that I was mentioning earlier, she's going to create an entire series of offerings and, speaking series and storytelling around what she calls the power of the pause because of a few life events that forced her to stop really like dead in her tracks because she couldn't continue on. And what taking that quiet space did for her as she was reflecting on her life and what she wanted and how she wanted to move and where she wanted to go. And one of the reflections you gave to me in your pause is that it was really hard. You don't know how to stop. And so like it almost this feeling of guilt around like, no, it's okay to turn on Netflix when I'm healing and I'm allowing my body to rest. Like, and I know for a absolute certain fact that many, many, many women are the same. We are wired the same way. And so curious if you can unpack that just a little bit.
Yeah, I think for me, taking a pause creates space for me to be more intentional. And because it takes me so long to just stop, and even stop is a really funny thing because I don't think I ever stop. I just stop that one thing and I replace it with something else. And so really taking time to reflect and to think about like, is what I'm doing of value? Am I really making the impact that I thought I was going to make? I mean, in our work life, we set goals every year. I'm going to accomplish these 4 or 5 things, or we're going to accomplish these 4 or 5 things as a team. And here's how we'll know that we've been successful. I think it's important to do that in your personal life and not goals around, I'm going to get this job, I'm going to make this money. It's what are the things that bring me the most joy? What are the things that fill my cup? What are the things that align with my values? So like my service with YLI is largely important to who I am at my core. And so it gives me the space outside of my professional career to foster what gives me energy and to keep me fueled every day.
Yeah.
And as I, look and, look through a new lens at work, it's kind of like, why are we doing that?
Yeah.
Who is that really for? And why does it have to be so complicated? And do we have to do it differently? Like it's just, you just start thinking differently about how you spend your time and where you spend your energy. What is it that I want to focus on? And how can I move my energy in that space? And if that space, and this is not me saying this about me, this is just me, I don't know, I guess giving general life advice. If the things you do on a daily basis at work don't align with your attention and your energy, then you're in the wrong place and you should actively be thinking about, well, what does that place look like where those things can happen? Yeah. And I know that, again, that's very easy to say, but I'm living proof that there have been times in my career where I have been in places where it didn't align anymore, or we were going in a direction that maybe I was like, I don't think I'm going to learn from this. And
Yeah.
maybe looking back, maybe I would have, who knows? But I was like, okay, it's my time. And so as I, take a pause and I think about like, well, what are those things that will fill my cup? What are those things that I can continue to create, impart on others, etc., that will keep me energized? And how do
Yeah.
I incorporate that more into my day versus having like my work life and
Yeah.
then my home life? How do we incorporate more of that so that we can take a break and a pause, whether we're in an office, in the house, at a work share space, whatever that looks like, and still be full? It's been a lot of years in the making, but learning how to just to sit still and say, you know what? I'm just gonna sit and listen to the birds today. I'm
Mhm.
gonna I'm gonna watch. I've watched the trees outside of my window bloom over the past few months, like
Mhm.
intentionally. So
Yeah.
it's like wow, look at nature, look at life happening
Yeah.
around us, and when you're running, you miss it.
I know. I know. I know.
I know
I do.
I sound like I've really acclimated to California
I
at
love
this
it.
point.
I love it. I love it. I was going to say, how, yes, you have really
Go
so,
hug a tree, everybody. It'll change your life.
it's so real though, because I think the more we can bring those routines or rituals or habits, whatever you want to call them, even if they're small little
Mhm.
things into our lives, like it allows for a different, to me, I feel like I can honestly physically feel like I'm dropped into a more grounded, talk about sounding like California. Oh my gosh.
Let's get into it, Kristen. I'll
We
burn
could
some
really go there.
incense. We could really this.
Really go there. That's a whole other conversation. I can physically feel it. Like when I am
Mhm.
more centered and grounded in myself, I show up more authentically as
Yeah.
who I am, or I'm not as, I can get that like frenetic energy when I'm like not just taking a breath, And so I think to allow ourselves that and to know that we don't have to feel guilt or shame for not being in it like all the time, that has to be okay.
Mhm.
But that's really, really hard to do, I think, for a lot of
It
women.
is. Oh yeah, 100%. Because back to your earlier point, we feel like we have to be on and we have to be the best and we have to show up, magnificent all the time. So taking a pause, taking a break, or even just saying like, I'm I'm gonna go walk away from this for a minute. It
Yeah.
feels wrong in a lot of
Yes.
ways. We have to give ourselves permission to, I don't know, unlearn all of that toxic corporate. If you're not working and hustling 24/7, like rest is not a reward. It's just our human right to
Yeah.
like it's what we should be doing in these moments. So
Yeah.
it took me
It's
a long time.
essential. It's essential.
Hmm.
Um, okay, the last question I always ask everyone, and you can sit with it for a minute if you want. We can get
Okay.
V1 or we could so much of the work I've been focused on recently is how do you bridge the kind of like, yes, business strategy and what you want from your career and what you're building, but also with who you are as a human and as you show up in your professional development and leadership development.
Hmm.
And all of that to me is leading to like, what is the legacy you want to leave?
Hmm.
And what is the legacy you're building toward? Because we are building it today. It's not about where we're going to be in 20 or 30 years from now. But when I think about that, I think building a legacy means something very different
Hmm.
to everyone. And I've gotten really interesting, unique answers to like, what does building a legacy mean to you?
Yeah, it's so funny that you asked this question because in my pause, I've been thinking a lot about legacy and what does that mean, but not in the grand sense, not like, am I going to be written about in somebody's HR
No.
manual? Because
Yeah. But that would be
probably
cool.
not. It would be like, yeah. I don't know under what category other than like table shaker, but I feel like I've been thinking a lot about the environments that I'm in, especially at work. And when I look at the makeup of my current team, we are largely female. We are largely underrepresented ethnic minorities. We are largely people who come from different disadvantaged backgrounds. And so I often think about what is the way that I could show up, continue to show up, be authentically me, and create space around me where I'm not taking up the room, I'm creating space in the room so that those other people even if they're just in the room to watch, can see someone that they identify with, to say, I can be that. And it's possible to just be yourself, slang, a couple of cuss words, and just, leading as you are, making mistakes in front of people, admitting what you don't know, like all of those things that make me who I am, and just say, listen, take it or leave it. This is what you're getting.
Yeah.
And, just being an example for them, to show them you can be the thing, whatever the thing is. It may not be this, it could be something else, but you could be that and still be true to yourself. You could be that and still be authentic. So when I think of legacy, I think of, my dad said when I was little, always leave things better than you found it, including people.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I think of my legacy, I think of that portion of me. Like, in some moments, was that authentically me, or was I putting on for someone? And who's watching? Because I know younger Laura would be in spaces where I would be watching how people showed up. And then I would see them outside of that space and say, they're not the same person, or and not fully understand code switching, or not fully understand all of the nuance and the games that you have to play sometimes. And for me, I made a conscious decision that I wasn't going to do that. If the space no longer serves me, then that's not the right space for me.
Yeah.
And so how do I just remain authentic? How do I create safe spaces for others? And how do I live by example and not tell someone, you need to do this, but then I show up totally different in those spaces, which is some of what I got early in my career. So I think when I think legacy, that's what I think of today. I don't know. In a couple of days, I might think of something else.
No, I love it. I love it. Because all we can do is work within the day that we have. And so I think it's so perfect, and it feels so aligned to how I know how you show up in the world. Last thing is, you had said earlier, it's easier said than done, that if you find yourself in a space that doesn't serve you, to move on. But I think you're not suggesting that people just like say, forget it, I'm out of here. No.
Sometimes there's the balance. That's where you find, like, I know when I've been in spaces, in jobs where I'm like, oh, this doesn't feel like a good fit anymore. Sometimes if I know I can't change, I'm not in a position to change my situation, I look for things outside, volunteer work. I was class mom for like as long as they would allow for me to do. I found other ways to fulfill myself, to offset what I was going through career-wise, so that it didn't feel quite so heavy until I was in a position to make a change.
Your point is that you're challenging people to be in tune with themselves enough to know when something does not feel right. And it's okay to know that then might mean that it's time to seek something else, whether it's something that will feed you in the moment or something longer term that will be a bigger shift or a bigger jump. And
also financial literacy. If you have some FU money in the bank, you move differently. I learned that very early in my career. Someone sat me down and said, pay yourself first. And to this day, I pay myself first. And so if something doesn't serve me, it just changes the way you move in a situation that's not serving you, because you can say, you know what? Maybe I can leave and find something else and take a break. It just gives you a different mindset on what you're willing to put up with. Even if you decide to stay, in the back of your mind, like, I have that thing that's just waiting in the wings.
Yes. Oh my gosh. This is going to be the second time that I reference Rachel Rodgers's book because of you. We Should All Be Millionaires. It is worth mentioning it again and again and again, because I think those of us that maybe came to that knowledge later in life and what it means to be a woman as it relates to wealth building and all of the things and the mental gymnastics that we have to do to make ourselves okay with that conversation. She does a beautiful job of breaking it down with both history and humor in a way that I feel like allows for women to think differently about what building wealth means. But yes, that's another shout out for her book.
There's also a book called Financial Feminist by Tori Dunlap.
I love
she
that
is
one
phenomenal. And
I love her.
Her whole financial journey started with building some FU money and quitting her job and starting down this path. And so even if it takes you years to get there, if it's the goal, then you will achieve it. And whether you achieve it in 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, just working towards it gives you peace of mind.
Thank you so much for taking time and space to chat with me today. You're just always so wonderful, and I appreciate your time always.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for such a lovely conversation and creating a space for me and for other women to have these conversations. They're so important.
Yeah, agreed. Love you the most.
Oh,
See you soon.
bye.